Okay, hi everyone, we're here. I'm Megan Murphy. This is Same Drugs. This is my friend Chrissie.
Hi, thanks for having me, Megan.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I was just saying briefly before we went live that I've been like super paranoid to do live streams over here because the Wi-Fi situation in Mexico, which is where I am, I think as many of you know, but perhaps not all of you, is kind of sketchy and like weather dependent. So if it like rains or there's a big storm, then the Wi-Fi goes down. And also in general, the Wi-Fi sucks. So if the Wi-Fi is weird, then please tell me. I don't know if I'll be able to resolve it, but just yeah, let me know if things start to
You're like, if you couldn't
sketch
tell by the
out.
hoop earrings, I'm in Mexico.
If you couldn't tell
Yeah.
by my dreadlocks.
Yeah. I normally
like
always have my hair
humidity hair.
curly. I normally always have my hair curly like yours, Megan, but today I got my hair did for the first time since March. Like cut my roots were like really
March?
coming in March. I
Dude.
had very much ignored my hair, but like certain people I go to, they don't do this, but the lady today did it where it's like very, very, this is like virgin hair. So it's like very red here. And then it's like a different color at the roots than the bot. These are my problems.
Yeah.
So,
That happens. I mean, that happens every time I get my hair done. I haven't been able to do much with my hair over here because I'm scared of like going to try to find a
a
hairstylist that I'm not
person.
familiar with. So last time I went back to Vancouver in June and got my hair done, and then I was like, I guess that's it for me
Is
until
there
I
no
go back to
Yelp?
Canada
Is there a
again.
Yelp in Mexico? Certainly you can find a place to get your hair did.
I don't speak Spanish, so
Get your palo did. Yeah.
I just don't, I like have hair paranoia. You probably have hair paranoia too because you have very beautiful hair and it's probably very
Oh.
specific and you don't want to just go to somebody and have them fuck up your hair.
I yes, I have about 3 people that I could go to. Like I have my favorite girl is in New York City. She like lives in Brooklyn and it's like when I was in there every day, it would be very easy to like go down and see her. And now I'm there kind of like once a week and the one day a week I'm in there is when she's not working there. So it's like it's been a real pain in the ass. And then I have one person out in West I have 2 people in Westchester. But like
Wow.
if forced to, I actually am not like, oh, only certain people touch my hair. I'm like, you know what? Here's the deal. I'm a dark blonde, living as a ginger. I'm living a lie here. And I show them pictures, and it's usually all right. And if it's, I've had people botch it up, and I've had it superhero red. I've had it very dark auburn. So I'm kind of just like, it's just hair. You know,
That's
I'm
not
too
how I feel
trusting.
at all. I feel like super paranoid about letting people touch my hair to the
I'm
point that
so
I'd rather nobody touch my hair.
and
This color is like, I mean, you guys obviously like I'm a
it's
redhead in
pretty.
my heart and my soul, but this isn't exactly my natural color. And I feel like I've spent years figuring out what my natural unnatural color should be, and
I
I don't
like
want to fuck
it.
around with
I like
it.
it. I've also had like I'm weirdly not picky. Like I've had every woman who works at my waxing place has waxed me at this point because I'm always canceling and making appointments and they're like, "Oh, do you want one specific?" I'm like, "No, literally whoever is standing around can wax my cooch." So I'm
Okay, well,
weirdly
you're a lot more
not picky.
easygoing than I
I'm just like, "Get in there, girls." I don't know.
am.
I feel like
Okay,
my
so did you not get your hair done since March because of like COVID stuff?
No, just from not even laziness. Like I just got real busy and I know with like when you're a redhead, I mean, I used to be very dyed blonde. I had like a Midwestern mom haircut for a while. Like in college I had like short and then like a bang and then like up the back. And then I started to grow
Wow.
it out. And then I had an ex-boyfriend who was like, you should really dye your hair brown. I really think that would be hot. And then I was like, fuck you. And I dyed it red. And it's sort of
Move.
stuck
Power
with
move.
me. It was a power move. Yeah, and then he got hit by a bus. I mean, he
You're
broke
not
up with me on Skype, but I feel like in the end,
on Skype.
karma retaliated.
Why
Skype.
Skype? Why Skype?
That's a question only Raphael can answer. He was up the whole weekend, Martin Luther
Raphael.
King weekend.
The
This was like
stupid
in
name.
2000. We met February 8th, 2008. I have like an autistic memory for dates. And then we broke up. I think, yeah, it might have been like, it was like 2.5 years later. So it was like summer of 2010 or 11. Well, now I remember when we met, but I don't know. He was up all weekend and he took the bus back to DC and then broke up with me from Skype.
On Skype, because like you guys were not in the same place.
Right, because he had moved. I met him in New York. He was studying wind energy at Columbia. And I was like, ooh, he's getting an advanced degree. Meanwhile, it's just 1 year, just a 1 year degree. Like anybody can get it. Anybody in the chat, anybody can study wind energy for a year.
He
It's
went to
not all that
college for
impressive.
1 year.
Big fucking deal. Yeah. And then he went to DC to chase a wind career. But then I was very like, it was obvious that I was the one that was caring too much about the relationship. Like I was putting more into it. I was
Isn't
like,
that
oh,
always the way?
yeah.
Have you been in relationships where you care less than the man?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
had
don't
one
know
guy.
if I
One
have.
guy
Maybe
I
once.
dated. One guy I dated. I sort of like fell in like with him, and then he got down from the bar. Like he looked like Robert Downey Jr. And then he was a bartender, and then he got down from the bar, and we were like the same height. He was like also 5'3", and I was like,
No,
well,
dude.
I can't be a superficial bitch now. I got to date him for 3 months.
Oh my God. I would never date anybody like, I don't know. I don't think I would date anybody under 6 foot, to be honest.
Well, look at you.
But I'm taller than you. I'm 5'8.5", I think.
Oh wow, that's awesome. I wish I could be that tall. You can like
You're 5'3", actually?
5'3".
Is that what you said?
I was always 5'2", and then I think I did a lot of yoga and I stretched.
Okay.
So I have a taller
5'3" for a man. I mean, I'm glad for him that somebody dated him, so good for you.
I'll date just about anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I've been very unpicky in my past.
Are you married? You have a partner right now, right?
Yeah. Boyfriend of, God, it feels like we're married, or I imagine how marriage would feel. But yeah, it's been like 6.5 years.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's wild. But luckily I keep it fresh because I've been like 3 different people in that time.
Changing your hair color.
Yeah. Or like being nuts, going to therapy, working on myself, coming back anew. Yeah.
A whole new you. 6.5 years I feel like is a long time. I feel like I'm interested to know how like you managed that. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I think communication. People always talk about communication. But it's also like, for me, it was having like kind of getting real with myself, like stop pretending to be I don't know, this person that I'm not, and be like, okay, instead of who I'd ideally like to be, like, okay, who am I really today, and what are my needs, and like just do the best job you can at communicating like what you need. And you have to be so vulnerable in order for that to like be successful. It's like, I would like to think I'm like this super confident bitch who like never needs anybody and has no needs ever, and it's just so easy. But I think like my mom got cancer and died, and like that like gutted me. But I learned a lot about myself. I'm like, oh wow, it opened up all this space for me, and like what came in was like everything I wasn't doing for myself. And I felt like, we all grow up. Our child circumstances are like, sometimes you develop certain skills to like survive or whatever, and it's your job as an adult to be like, okay, do these patterns serve me or do they not? And you know what I mean? Like I was kind of raised to be like the emotional sort of like buttress for like definitely my mom. I think also my sister, like their whole mood I felt like was dependent on me. Like like I had the power to like pick them up when they were down. Like if my mom and dad were fighting, my mom was like bummed out, like, oh, I could make her laugh. I could like spend time with her and like perk her up. But then over time, I felt like that was like my job. Like if I wasn't around, or if
so much pressure for a kid.
Yeah. Like if I moved to Brooklyn and like, oh, you never visit enough. Like, oh, you're never here. And it's like, meanwhile, you're like, no one's trying to visit me at all. Like even now, like my family's all over the country. And like, everyone's like, when are you coming to visit? And it's like, oh, no one ever talks about when they're going to come visit me. And then you just have to take a step back and be like, oh yeah, like I'm a person too. Like you guys could get off your fucking asses. And, but then it's like, old Chrissie would have been like, oh, well, they moved away from New York because they were over the taxes or the traffic, or they were just they were done with New York. So I should keep that in mind and then always go visit them. But like as an adult, you're like, no, I'm fucking, if you want to spend time with me, like this has to be 50-50 or at least like 60-40. But I'm just like, my nature is so people pleasery. So I will so easily go out and visit everybody and like do kind of all the work.
I feel like I'm not a people pleaser at all. I feel like my main problem in relationships is that I think that I know everything about everybody and that I'm right about everything, which, I mean, it doesn't mean like I'm not like the kind of person who like refuses to admit they do something wrong, because they do wrong things all the time. And I'm actually willing to admit that I'm wrong, even if I don't think I'm wrong in a relationship, just to kind of like keep the peace. But I do, and I know this based on feedback from having many different boyfriends, be like, you know what? You don't know more about everybody else than everybody does.
Like, but I'm so perceptive and feminine and wise. And it also takes like,
but I'm a doctor.
Yeah. The right person for me is somebody who is not going to be super duper clingy, because like, especially with stand-up, I would be out like many nights a week until the wee hours. And it's like, if you're insecure, like that's going to trigger you all the time. So like, but things have changed with the pandemic. It's like, I was out less, you know, I was home more, but now it's like, oh, I have this whole new podcast that I started. I do like a lot of work. I do like all my working from home, except for like once a week I go into the city for my compound media show. But for like the bulk of our relationship, like I was gone a lot. And he also has a 10-year-old son. So I feel like there were so many things like kind of like pawing at both of us. Like we had each of us like major responsibilities that were not the other person. So I think it's made us both like less needy. Like when you're like a real ass adult and you have like grown ass, you know, like kids. Oh my God. Dating someone with a kid has taught me so much. Like the long and short of the lesson is like, it's not all about you, but like, I think when you're a single person dating another single person, you can like send enough hints, you know, like, I feel ignored. But like when you date somebody with a kid, it's like they're not going to take your hints. Like you have to verbalize. Like you have to.
Well, and also be a grown up. Like I sort of like I lost patience for that shit as I got older. So I assume men also lose patience for that shit. Where it's like, do I have to guess at what's wrong with you? Fuck off. Like just tell me. Like this is what adults do. And if you're gonna like play weird games and make me like think, oh, you're pouting, or you're not talking to me, and I'm supposed to figure out what's going on. It's super rude and self-absorbed, and I'm not into that. I mean, that's for 20-year-olds.
And true. Like, I don't know if this is a stereotypical woman thing, but like, I know when I was younger, I wouldn't speak my mind or communicate as much because I go, oh, the thing that I'm worrying about is like, it's in my head or it's not a big deal. And I would try to like work it out on my own time, you know, instead of like with the other person, which is ultimately like you're hiding yourself from your partner, from your, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend. If like you keep so much to yourself, it's like you're actually like cutting a big chunk out of that relationship.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that you should have open communication in a relationship, ideally. And I can hear a little bit of a storm coming, so I hope that
Mexico.
But I guess, I mean, I feel like I've had a hard time in relationships because I'm very good at communicating, and I'm very open, and I'm very good at talking about my feelings, and there's nothing that's off the table for me. Like I'm the opposite of the kind of person who is like, I don't want to talk about this. Like I don't shut down at all. I want to talk about everything. I want to talk about everything right away. It's like how I process.
That's really good. That's a really good quality.
Well, I thought you would think so. But I find like a lot of men are not like that. And so I've had lots of issues in my relationship sort of with this, like men being like, why do you have to talk about everything all the time? Like, why don't you just leave things alone? And I'm like, I can't help it. But I also I don't think that's healthy. Like I think
because things
should talk things through.
Like, doing is bad. Anytime I'm like, because I've been like very much stereotypical dude, like I don't want to talk about it, but then things just stew and it never. And then what? Now you're gonna bring up something from a month ago? Like this bothered me a month ago, and I didn't say anything because I didn't, you know, like. Debating is never helps.
Yeah, I don't think stuff just goes away. And then I think that when you don't talk about stuff, I mean, sure, there's been stuff that I've been not brave enough to bring up or ask. Like, if you feel insecure about something or insecure about the relationship and you kind of don't want to be like, so what's going on? Because you're afraid of being
Especially the
rejected.
beginning phase when you're like,
Yeah.
does this person want to commit to me? I'm usually
Yeah.
so good at that phase because I'm like so busy and I'm like, oh, so many other people are interested in me. I don't know. Maybe I have time for you this week. Like I crush it at
Okay.
the beginning. But
That's
then
a
when I'm
good,
like
that's a good
with
strategy.
someone and it's just me, then I feel vulnerable again.
Yeah. But I do, yeah, like, so I think, I mean, yeah, I guess I'm assuming your partner also enjoys communicating and
He's
is good at
way more than me.
communication.
He's a Gemini. He's like a textbook
Jeez,
Gemini. Stuff he
man.
like and he's Italian, so he like loves to talk, a lot of talking with his hands. But it's good because like I'm better at it now, but he would be the person to be like, and it sometimes does help when there is one person in the relationship that's like, I can tell you need to talk, and they help sort of like pull it out of you. Not like it should be their job, and that can get exhausting after a while. But if you are someone who doesn't mind like helping someone coax out their feelings, that can be really great because I know that he was that way for me, and it's helped so much because just my family was not communicative. Like we all were like so passive aggressive to each other. Like the example I had for like man woman relationship, my looking at my parents, like they never had like good communication. They would just cut each other down and be passive aggressive and like shit on the other one when the other one was out of the room. And so that's why for like basically up until very recently, I've been like petrified of the idea of marriage because I'm like, oh, once you get married, like that person immediately takes you for granted. You're like the person they like the least. Like they're dying to get away from you all the time. Like it
Okay.
was wild. Like even at one point when my mom was like sick with brain cancer, like she at one point like got mad at my dad and said to me, she's like, your father gave me cancer. And I'm just like, whew, they had a very unhealthy relationship. Like, she
Jesus.
also said some funny shit too. She was like, this whole time we were married, my dad's name is Frank. Like Frank wanted me to lose weight, and well, now I'm skinny, but I also have cancer. Like she did say a couple of funny things. Like, well, now I've lost the weight, but
I feel like I never wanted to get married because I thought that when you get married, everything got super boring and you got super codependent because my parents
yes.
basically only hung out with each other and didn't have other friends. I didn't do social stuff and were so like enmeshed and like just like they took the like we work as a team thing to the extreme and I hated it and I was like I want to be independent. I'm also very social. Like I still want to have fun and marriage doesn't seem like any fun at all and like I don't want to be I mean and I still like it's like I don't want to be I don't even like I don't want to be in the kind of relationship where you always know what the other person is doing. I don't
No,
want
there's
like I want us to have
mystery.
private
Yeah,
lives. Like I don't
absolutely.
like
I think it's because our parents are a parent like boomer generation. Like a lot of them got married right out of high school or during or right out of college. So it's like if you spend all of your 20s with somebody and you're married during your 20s, like those are your growing up years. Like I
that.
lived lived outside my parents' house. Like I moved out at 26, which is too late, but like I was out for like many years before I started like living with a guy. So it's like I think it's good to do that because you learn how to do everything by yourself. And then, then you're with somebody, you're like, oh, cool. I don't have to do as many things like house things, or maybe you're sharing rent or alternating taking out the garbage or whatever. But it's nice to be like, okay, but I know if things crashed and burned, I could then do all this stuff on my own. Because I think a big reason my parents never got divorced is because they were probably like, oh, how do we survive alone? Like financially, like did they each make enough to like pay rent on their own, or probably not, and
Well,
my
and just not
dad,
even being
yeah,
able to imagine a life without the other person because you never did that. Like I have the experience of being in relationships and being single and being happy being single. So it's like as much as, like I do want to be in a relationship, but I know that I can function on my own and be fine and be happy and it'll be okay. And if I had stayed with my boyfriend of when I was 20, like we were super codependent. We were super like all up in each other's business and like way too controlling of each other and like, don't talk to that chick at the bar and all this shit. Not that this kind of stuff doesn't come up as adults, but like just the entitlement. You feel really entitled to that other person and that other
Mm.
person's attention. And like, I think for us, we got into this unhealthy like makeup breakup, not we're breaking up, but we'd get in a big fight, and so he'd be in trouble, and he'd have to make up for it. And making up for it was like, oh, you have to like buy stuff for me or take me, like all this like immature kind of princessy stuff,
Wow.
right? Where that you don't recognize as toxic maybe when you're 20 or whatever.
Yeah, I had a boyfriend where like we get into these screaming matches till we'd fight till like 2 in the morning. And I remember like the job I had at the time, I had to be there sitting at my desk at 8 a.m. And I just like, it was so, and I always had this feeling of like I'm in trouble with him over nothing. Like he would just like create, I think he just would like, he was very insecure. He was alcoholic. I know how to pick him right. And a stand-up comic. So like all these.
Oh, I'm perfect. I'm perfect at picking men.
A lot
like
of
it's just been perfect this whole
insecure
time.
traits. Yeah. And it's like you always think like, oh, I want someone who's just like me, and it's like, no, sometimes you need somebody with that's definitely not like you, that can balance you out in very healthy ways. Like there have been guys where like you could so easily just have sex all day. It's the best sex. It's wild. It's fun. You go to eat. It's like, but like, was I getting anything done in those relationships? Was I expanding? Was I accomplishing my goals? Was I like accomplishing my dreams? Did that person even care about my dreams?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then,
I think being
yeah.
supportive of like, yeah, supportive of you like growing as a person and you being an independent person and growing like in your career and stuff is a really big deal, which I sort of learned later in life. And it takes, you know, I mean, I don't know how this is going to be interpreted, but I was going to say like it takes a real man to do that, especially with women like I think you and I, who are very like, you know, we're not passive women. We're like out there and we're doing kind of different things and we're controversial and we're very independent. And you can't be with insecure men when you're like that.
And you can't be worried, like, if you're with someone who's, like, a semi-public figure or somebody who's, like, making news every 6 months or something, like, you can't be like, "Oh, how is this gonna reflect on me?" Like, you can't be making it all, about you in a sense, and also, like, my boyfriend, like, he manages, like, a fan page of mine, he, like, helps with my Instagram, so it's like, he'll be looking at my DMs, and we can laugh together about some guy who just sent me 20 dick pics, you know, and it's like, but not every guy like, is gonna be okay with it. Not that that's happening all the time, but like, if a guy's kind of insecure, like, who is this guy? Are you talking to them? Like, what's a, and you know, and then they're like scrolling through just because they can see all your shit, are they gonna be like scrolling through and looking at everything? And, but then it's like, yeah, it takes time to like develop that trust and to like be real with each other. And it takes those like sometimes dramatic fights and like near breakups for you to be like, okay, at the end of the day, I still want to be with this person. Like, what do we have to do to make it work?
Yeah. Have you had issues? How long have you been doing comedy for?
Like 11 years of stand up. And then, geez, 5 years prior to that, I was doing improv.
And so have you had issues around like the stuff that you talk about in your comedy and like your personal life? Like has that ever had to come into conflict, or are the people that you're dating pretty like understanding in terms of what you talk about in your comedy? I mean, I don't know how, you know, how deep you go in your comedy in terms of your personal life, but I mean, of course there's personal stuff in there.
I've never had a guy that I've dated, including the current one, tell me like, don't tweet this or delete that or don't say that joke on stage. And definitely with the current boyfriend, like he understands that my stand-up is like an exaggeration of myself. It's like me and and it's like I'm putting on a show. It's like I have to like make everybody in this room have a good time tonight. And like, how do I phrase this without sounding like a prostitute? It's like you're the party, you're the good time. Like, so it's like I have to be the most fun, most exaggerated, like peak party Chrissy on stage, you know? And so that means like my experiences are exaggerated. Jokes, there's always a kernel of truth, but of course a lot of it is exaggeration too. But yeah, so I've never had a guy be like, "Oh, don't tell that joke about," like, I definitely have jokes about every guy I've dated. And then it's like, you know, it's funny because it's like my boyfriend and like his son have come to my shows, and it's like, okay, when I know that's happening, it's like, okay, I'm not gonna tell certain jokes. I'm not trying to like traumatize this kid, you know? Like, and even though like he's a smart like kid who like loves comedy, it's like, okay, I'll leave that out because I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to, even when I see kids in the crowd, I'm like, oh God, you know, I'll have to make like little corrections so I'm not like up there talking about like a Brazilian wax for 10 minutes. But
Yeah.
in terms of like, yeah, like there have been like that same guy that I dated, he more wanted me to adjust like my real time self, not my comedy self. Like he was like, "Oh, can you take off some makeup and then we can kiss?" Or like, "Oh, can you just wear your hair back?" And then like so over time, I was somebody who always wore my hair back and I had like no makeup on. Like he was literally wanting me to like dim my light. And he was the same person who would get like very insecure when I'd be like around other male comics and just like, and we all get insecure at times, but like it was too much. It was like he wanted me to do like too many changes. um and it was before like I was really into stand up. Like I was, he, you know, the ex boyfriend like got me when I was just starting, so I think I would have grown more if I had not been with him. Like I, you know, the people at the comedy clubs were like, "Oh, you're his boyfriend," instead of like, "Oh, you also do comedy."
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I've had a boyfriend that kind of like I felt like picked at me to the point where I started to feel like I was shrinking, like I was becoming
Oh,
less of myself.
it's the
And it was
worst.
yeah, and it
Yeah.
was like and I also it was like I like myself and it was like he was constantly accusing me of like flirting with everybody and I was like,
Mhm.
"What are you
Same.
talking
I think
about?
we
Like I'm
dated the
just
same
being
guy. Yeah.
friendly." Like and like, you know, and I also like I talk to a lot of people and I'm outgoing and like, you know, I touch people, but I do it to women too. Like when I'm talking, I'll like touch their arm and stuff. It's like I'm not like saying sexual things to these people. Like I'm not hitting on them, and I wouldn't even be aware of it. And then it just made me feel super paranoid and insecure all the time. And just be like, I guess I just shouldn't talk to any men when we go out because he's gonna start acting weird and bitchy to me, which is just like a horrible way to live.
Yeah, and it's you
To
have
be
to know,
like so
especially with like
self-conscious.
social media. It's like somebody, it's a horrible thing to think about, but it's like your significant other could be totally flirting with like 10 other people on social media in DMs and you would never know. And it's like thinking about that is it could eat you up, but it's like all you can do is like state your needs to that person as clearly as you can and like just like, you know, try to get that in return and not think about like what ifs, you know, and
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a tough one because it's true because your partner could be doing all sorts of things and especially in this like online era
so
where
easy to
everybody is
do.
and yeah, and you could just be DMing somebody and it's so easy for it to cross the line and the line is blurry and blah 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 blah.
And it's an easy
And
thing to do, especially if you're somebody who like, and I used to be, I was this way in my 20s. I would like get my validation from guys. Like if I wasn't feeling good about myself, especially when I was like single, oh my God, I have so many conversations going and but that is so fleeting. It's like, and you learn this as you get older, like you build yourself up, like work on your goals like that. Then you don't need a bunch of people in your DMs telling you how hot you are all the time because you're like, oh, it shows in your life. You know, you feel like you're building something.
yeah, I totally think it's a sign of insecurity, both when women do it and when men do it. Like when you're seeking any kind of validation, not when you're seeking any kind of validation online, because I'm sure everybody does that to a certain extent. I mean, we're all, especially, you know, like, you know, you have to engage in social media, but like through either kind of like, I don't know, constantly posting things that are obviously you're trying to get attention from men or
There's
through
the
yeah like
worst.
DMing women or trying to get women's attention online and it's like what is this like what's the like what are you trying to get out of this like if you're like in a relationship if you're seeing somebody and you're DMing like random women that you don't know online or flirting with women online it's like are you I've never really understood this because I don't really do this to be honest and
Well,
I
it's like
didn't even really
validation.
do
It's a
this when I
quick,
was single but
it's like a
yeah
quick,
like it's
it's
like
like a
are you gonna
drug. It's
sleep
like a
with these
quick hit, you
people.
know? It's just happening in your phone. Nobody has to know about it. And like maybe if you don't feel like you can voice your needs to who you're with, it's like, oh, well, I'm just answering DMs. Like I'm not doing anything wrong. Like these people are just coming to me and I'm just responding. And it's like if you're not comfortable to have that conversation of like what you need or what you're lacking, it can be a very, you know, temporary fix because you're like, oh, I feel good. Somebody on the internet thinks I'm hot, but like you're still not fixing your problems.
Yeah, and I think that I think that building confidence, I mean, I've sort of learned this, again, like as I've gotten older, which is that but even when I was younger, I knew, like even when I was like 19 and I thought I was hot shit and I was like, oh, I can like get any man I wanted, I still knew that I had to kind of develop my personality and develop other skills and develop other things because I knew that that wasn't permanent. And I'm really surprised at the amount of people who seem unaware that youth and that kind of attractiveness isn't permanent, and that in order to build real confidence, you need to do things that make you feel proud of yourself. You need to be like good at things. You need to develop skills. You need to, overcome. You need to do things that are hard and that you're scared of so that you know that you're capable.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
just like always kind of being self-aware. It's like combination of like examining yourself and your patterns. Yeah, maybe therapy can help you with that. And for me, I had like textbook daddy issues. You know what I mean? Like you'd be like, oh yeah, not close with her dad, had a very slutty phase. Like we get it. Is doing stand-up comedy. Like we get it. You didn't get enough attention growing up. But then part of that was like, yeah, I feel like I could be honest with a room full of strangers more so than with my own family. Cause I'm like, with my own family, I'm gonna hurt somebody's feelings. They're not gonna be prepared for how I really think. So that to me, a room full of strangers was like no stakes at all. Like I'll never see these people again. And if I can like sort of make fun of myself and others, it's like, oh, great.
I'm curious to know because I know that you interview a lot of like porn stars on your channel and your podcast and things like that. So I'm curious to know what you think about porn. Like, do you like think it's a good thing? Do you care if your partner uses it? Like, what's your perspective?
Okay. The reason why I interview porn stars is like, well, at first I will have this show on Compound Media called The Wet Spot, where it's like a fun sex dating relationship advice panel show, and I wanted it to be like early Howard Stern, so I'd have like porn stars and comedians on, and we'd be like just giving like fun advice to the people who would call in, and sometimes like I mean, and then the guests range from like, oh, some girl with an OnlyFans to like a hardcore dominatrix who's bringing in a sub like with a leash and like a dog mask, um where he had like his junk and advice. Like there's been some wild stuff. Like we had a girl on and she did like anal ring toss. Like we have fun. But mostly it's like to entertain and give advice. And then in January of 2020 I went to the AVN Awards, and that's when I was starting my own like solo one-on-one podcast, like more interview. And so I was like, oh, I'll just interview these girls at AVN, because I thought it was such a jackpot when you can meet like not all porn stars, like, they're not paid for their personality. Like they're paid for how sexy they are on camera and how good they are. So it's like when I would meet these girls that are also really like funny and witty and smart and can keep up, I'd be like, oh, this is like a win-win. This is like ideal situation. So yeah, I went to EVN. I'm interviewing these girls. I'm like kind of like building up my network. And then I found like there was a similarity between like comedians and porn stars. Like we're sort of, deemed not part of like proper polite society. Like you kind of get stamped with the like forever, you're not somebody who can like who's really desirable to work in corporate America if you've either like been a comedian or an actor or like a porn star. And the more that I've talked to them, the more I'm like, oh wow, they've really faced like they've had their bank accounts sort of like taken away from them. They face like, and we face like sort of similar censorship in a way. And I think porn stars are an interesting example of like, well, they're sort of it's very like considered like it's a default left community and like industry, much like comedy is. So when I meet the girls who are like a little more left of like who are more centrist or more conservative, I'm like, that's fascinating to me because they experience hate from both the left and the right. The left, because it's like you get the super feminists that are like, oh, porn stars, you're horrible. You support the patriarchy. Everything you do is for the male gaze, like the male view. It's I mean, of course, there's tons of like female friendly porn out there, but like I'm talking like the textbook leftist feminists are going to hate on porn stars for that reason, right? They support the patriarchy, and then your religious right conservatives are going to hate porn stars because of like their moral reasons. So it's like I have
Yeah,
a
like you're
soft
destroying the
yeah.
family
Yeah, I have a soft
unit or
spot
whatever.
for, like, talking to people and listening to people and hearing the stories of people that are, like, misunderstood or heavily censored. Like, I've had Gavin McGinnis on my podcast a bunch, Anthony Cumia. So I just kind of like hearing from people that are silenced in a way and being like, "Oh, what's so bad about them? Like, let's hear them out." And then even recently, like, I had, Brandy Love on, and she was kicked out of the Turning Point USA, event, the,
What's
what was it?
up?
Student Action Summit. It was like they had, like, a Turning Point USA, it's like I guess they're like a conservative like maybe news outlet. I don't know how to describe them, but they had like an event where like a lot of conservative speakers were there, and like Brandy Love went. She's a porn star. She got kicked out because she's a porn star, not because she was handing out cards or scantily clad or anything, just because she was there, and they just didn't agree with porn star being at their event. It's interesting to talk about like, okay, well, where do they draw the line? Like, are we not going to let you know people in me because if they've had an abortion or if they've worked for Planned Parenthood, like where does that stop? So then the question of like porn in my own life, like I don't watch porn. Like if I'm just like masturbating or something, I literally like maybe this is boring, but I just need my imagination. Like I will just invent
I don't think that's
scenarios.
boring. I always wonder why more people don't
Yeah,
just
I'm
use
just
their
like I have an
imagination.
imagination, like I can just dream up what scenario I want to happen. And I'm more like, of course, now my Twitter feed, I open it up, it's like all my porn star friends that I follow. I'm like, oh, good for you. Like, I'll sometimes watch my friend's porn that she's in, but more from like an aunt. Like, I'm like, good for you. Like, look at you. You're so flexible. Like, I'm not like really like getting off on it. I'm more like want to be supportive and be like, let's see what she's up to. Um, just your friendly aunt watching your work.
And
In
have
the
you
past,
cared, like, sorry, go on.
I have watched porn with boyfriends. Like the toxic one would be like, "We're watching this together," and I'd be like, okay, I'll watch it if you're really into it. Like that's a service I provide as girlfriend. Like I will try to be into the things you're into, but it's like, for me, I was not like visually getting off on looking at something. For me, I have to like feel if a guy makes me feel a certain way, like then I get turned on, or if like I'm touched a certain way, then I get turned on. Like for me, I'm not gonna get turned on just by like watching something. Like even if I'm watching like a dude with a great body, I'd be like, okay, that's nice, but it's like I don't know.
This is
It's
how
meant
I've
to be
always
more.
felt about like dick pics, because I feel like I'm like, well, obviously, like I'm turned on by or like attracted to or whatever the dick that's attached to the person that I'm turned on by, but not like by an
No,
isolated
but
body
we could
part.
tell
Like
like we could Google right now and be like, why do we need anyone
it's
to
like
send us
gross. Like what?
pictures of
It's like a
dicks? The
random dick.
internet
Like,
is full of them. Exactly.
but
And
and
then
yeah,
there's
and sorry,
then there's
you
the
go on.
whole like separate issue, which I can see there's a really strong case for, is like the effect that porn has like on young men and older men. Like if you porn, just like any vice, you can get addicted, you can overindulge it. It can affect like the very like kind of setup of your brain, like your neurons. Like John Doyle is a like a Christian conservative. He did like a 2-hour video about how literally like there's different like neural pathways that are changed in your brain if you watch like too much porn. Like just the way it changes, it can change you, or like you need to keep upping the ante. Like that's why supposedly people get into very like super kinky porn, and like they have to just keep upping it because it's just like they need more and more to like hit that same novelty
Yeah, like
part of their
similar to
brain.
drugs, like you need
Yeah.
more, you're chasing that like hit that you experienced at first. You need something more extreme and more graphic or maybe more violent or more weird or whatever.
Totally. And then, of course, like if you're a young man growing up watching porn and then you get with a real woman, you'll be like, why is she not coming? I'm choking her as hard as I can. Of course, it's like, oh, Lord, if you're taking all your sexual cues and how to relate to women from porn, like you're going to strike out more often than not.
Yeah,
Even if
you're
you're an older guy,
screwed.
like I don't understand why she doesn't want to do doggy for 30 minutes straight. I mean, it feels really good to me. Like it's
Well,
like,
and then
buddy,
they think there's something wrong with the chick often because they're like, oh, she's so uptight. Like, she doesn't like sex. She's such a prude because she's not being turned on by all these things that I've seen all these other women turned on by. And it's like, dude, those women are acting. Like, this
yeah,
is not real
it's a
life. And
show.
you are paying attention to what your partner wants. And because you're so used to I mean, watching and you getting off in the exact way you want, and you don't have the experience that you need to understand actually how women's bodies works. And also that, like, I mean, unfortunately, women's bodies are all different. So different women are going to be turned on by all sorts of different things. There is one path to the female orgasm.
And I can see a guy would totally lose patience. No, I mean, like, I'm sure the average guy doesn't want to like go down on a woman for 30 to 45 minutes and be like, oh, try a bunch of different things and get her to come. When it's like he'll watch a video and someone's coming within 5 minutes. It's like, and then you get these real women that like maybe they're like, got to work some stuff out in their head, or maybe they have trust issues or dad issues, or the last boyfriend was abusive. And it's like, yeah, it's sometimes. And I can see guys losing patience with that. And it really can it can definitely take advantage of a certain type of guy. Like a guy could, with bartenders, when you go out, you have a bartender that's eventually going to cut you off, but like there's nobody to cut you off with. Like you could dump your whole banking, you could dump your whole checking account into a chick's OnlyFans. Like there is no one to cut you off. Like I have friends who were they OnlyFans? They weren't escorts, but they were, I think they were like phone sex operators. And they have stories of like, yeah, this guy like just emptied his whole, like spent all of his money. And I'm like, well, who is there to cut these guys off and be like, all right, you spent enough money for one day. But it can be a very addictive thing. And I think if a guy's like, oh, I really need this validation, it feels so good. And it's like, I think because a lot of men are so visual, it's like, and a lot of men like that sort of like sexual validation, like, oh man, it makes them feel like a king in the sack or whatever. And then you watch porn and these girls are like, they're so orgasmic, and like for a guy watching that, it makes them feel good, especially if it's like a POV. It's like, oh, they can put themselves in that position, like, wow, I'm the guy that's like satisfying her. Like that's such a ego boost. And then with a real woman who's not being paid to perform, it's like you have to do work sometimes to get like a woman off, or have many discussions about it, or like you use certain toys or whatever.
And it's not just like, like it's not just your dick. Like it's more than that. Like it's like, I think that men will learn in porn often, like, oh, if I just like do this thing with like, that's what all women want, and this is what's going to get all women off, and they're just going to come, and it's just going to be like that. And that's just not how
you could have the best dick on the planet. You could be the best at going down on somebody, but if you're with somebody and you like were ghosting her the last 2 weeks, like, yeah, she's probably not going to come, even if you have a six pack. It's like,
yeah, I know there's so much mental stuff involved too. Like it's like, I think I've talked about this before. Maybe I haven't. I'm always like in a weird position of trying to figure out how much to reveal and how much to not reveal.
Oh,
but I'm pretty
don't you sometimes
open.
get that like podcast regret? Like people after they talk to me on my show, they're like, "Oh God, I said this, and that." I'm like, what you're feeling is podcast regret.
I usually don't regret anything that I've said. I usually, when I listen back, I'm like, oh, that was like totally milquetoast.
But wait, I wanted to answer
there's like, sorry, go on.
I wanted to answer the thing you said before, like, would I mind if a boyfriend was like using porn? Because I've definitely dated guys who do, and like to be totally honest, if I knew that my boyfriend was watching a lot of porn, if I caught him, like I think ultimately it would make me feel bad about myself, because I'd be like, oh shit, oh shucks, like I am not enough to get this person off, or like, like you would hope.
I don't know if I take it personally. I mean, I hear that from a lot of women. I don't like pornography, and I don't feel super comfortable with my partners using pornography, but it's not so much that I think like, oh, they're not getting enough from me. I just find it disrespectful. Like it's sort of, because I feel like, I mean, I don't know what they're watching, but I do find a lot of porn to be misogynist and degrading. And I think that the industry is pretty exploitative and unethical. So I don't like, that my partner would be contributing to that. But I'm also sort of like, I don't know. I mean, I guess, and I suppose in a way it's sort of like, is this cheating? Like, is it cheating when your partner goes to the strip club and, gets a lap dance? Like, I would say, yeah, like kind of.
If they're getting a lap dance instead of hooking up with the girl in their DMs, like, is that good? Like, they didn't stick their dick in someone else. But then again, maybe that's like me with my like low standards and like history of like bad relationships. I don't know.
I'm not sure. It's something that I struggle with, to be honest. And a lot of people, I've been trying to have these conversations recently because, like I am one of those women who was a leftist feminist who was like, for a long time, like I didn't say porn stars are bad. I said the porn industry was bad. And I was critical of men who used porn. And I thought that, a lot of women in the porn industry didn't want to be there and were maybe troubled. I don't think it's good for women. But I've sort of been trying to have more nuanced conversations about these kinds of things lately, including strip clubs, including pornography, just because things are not black and white. Like I can't say, all men who use porn are misogynist or hate women, or all men who go to strip clubs are, bad to their partners. Because people are different and there's different circumstances, and just because I genuinely really want to understand what's happening, even if it makes me uncomfortable, even if I don't like it, even if I think it's disrespectful. And I've received a lot of comments from feminists that are the same things I would have said. So it's like, I know where you're coming from because I used to say these things too, or it's sort of like, well, of course, if he's going to a strip club, he doesn't respect you. Or of course, if he's going to a strip club, he doesn't respect women. Of course, if he's consuming pornography, he hates women. He's a misogynist. Anybody who would consume something like this, it's so unethical. He knows it's unethical. He's watching something that is, that he knows those women that he's watching don't like, for example. So therefore, he's a bad guy. And I just don't think it's as easy as that. And part of the reason that I don't think it's as easy as that is because, most men do watch porn and most men have been to strip clubs. And so I don't feel like I can, in good faith, say most men hate women. Like, I don't think they're thinking about it like that. I think they feel entitled to use these things and they want to use these things and they want to get off.
I think it's so easy. Yeah. It's like you see hot women going through your phone, like scrolling up through your phone. You're like, oh, this is so easy. It's like right here. They're not thinking about like, I wonder if any of these women are in a tough spot and can't get out financially, or if they're like, I wonder if any of these women are being like abused, or any of them were sex trafficked. It's like, no, they're just like,
you're like, oh, it's an ass.
This is hot. Yeah.
I like an ass.
And it's like, for me personally, like if a guy I was dating like went to a strip club without me, I'd be sad. I'd be like, oh man, I would have loved to have gone with you, because I've done that with boyfriends. Like, we have a blast. Like, let's both get a lap dance. Like, if you're looking for like, you need some spice or whatever, something new, I'd be like, let's do that together. But I've also like, done threesomes, and I've had like messed around with couples. Like, I'm a little bit more like, I guess, sexually maybe weird than a typical person, but at the same time, like, I haven't done a lot of that stuff in years because I'm trying to really like build my intimacy with this one person. And also it's like, threesomes are like babies. Like, if you're gonna have one to try to save the relationship, like it's not gonna work out, so
I would think that would make it worse. I've never had a threesome. I'm not interested. It seems like it seems distracting to me. I'm like, I feel like I want to focus on this person, and I can't imagine having to focus on this person and then another person at the same time. I feel like I would be able to focus on neither.
Yeah, I've found that like, okay, like I felt like such a multitasker, and it's like at no point was I like getting off. Like, I just felt like, oh, it's like more work for me. But I also so care about everyone's good time that like I'll do a pretty good job. But yeah, there are a lot to orchestrate.
People pleaser thing.
Such a people pleaser. Yeah.
Okay, so the wet spot is like a call-in show, right? People call in with sex questions, or that's part of it anyway, right?
Yeah, it's part of it. And then we'll just discuss like whatever kind of maybe like sex news is happening of the day, or we'll go through like a fun article. Like Monday we went through, I think it was like this BuzzFeed article is all about like different like men's deal breakers, but then we viewed it through the light of BuzzFeed, and it's like, okay,
what were the deal breakers?
Our male feminists writing this, you know what I mean? And like like caring too much about your appearance. God, there were so many. One was like having different interests than you, like easy things, and then you vote on it yes or no, and then you can see the percentage of people who voted that way. But it's fun to talk about that, and then you you go around the room and like you get everybody's take, like, all right, do you care if your girlfriend has like much different interests than you? And but then we have some shows that are like wild and we're doing like fun games, or like, I mean, one week we had like a penis quiz where we would like show pictures of penises and then we had to guess like what nationality the penis was from. Like, we'll do silly stuff like that. After you just got finished saying like, we don't like dick pics, but you know, it's also like a comedy
Well, maybe
show.
if it's funny. I was just saying that I don't find them
Yeah,
sexy.
and then we had like, we showed pictures of like vaginas and we're doing like different voices for like each one, which is silly, but
really mature.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, very mature.
I'm not judging you. I mean, so like, I'm curious to know, like, if you've like come across any sort of like modern like sex trends that have maybe surprised you. Like, what's have you learned from doing this podcast?
What have I learned? It's probably taught me to be a better listener. Like, I think like as far as like sex trends, like I think those have stayed the same for as long as I've been alive. Like, that it's not like I found out about like new kinks or anything. Like, maybe like, okay, OnlyFans was a kind of a new phenomena, like where it's like, oh yeah, like I knew girls who lost their jobs over the pandemic and then we're selling pictures of their butthole for $1,000 a pop. I'm like, okay, that's a new thing in my lifetime, you know. But like I think the kinks
I
are
mean,
kind
it's
of
kind
like,
of depressing, eh?
I'm just like, why did my parents spend so much money on college? Like, I could have just been selling pictures of my butthole to pay rent.
Would you want to sell your pictures of your butthole to pay rent?
Right now, no. I think my best butthole days are behind me. Yeah, right now I'm probably working with like a $20 butthole. No, who knows? I mean, like, that's the thing. And I have fans who are like, oh, Chrissy, please do an OnlyFans, please, please, please. And it's like, that would be another like full-time or part-time job too, because it's like the amount of outfits you have to buy. It's like, it really would shift me away from like my big goals, just because the amount of time, like if I was going to do it, it would take so much time that I wouldn't be getting like things done that I really wanted to. Like, my podcast would suffer.
It's not your primary goal
Yeah, it
to
would. I
be
think it
on
would be a
OnlyFans
distraction.
right now.
And there's like teeny part of me that would be like, oh yeah, it would be great. All these compliments. You know, it's like compliment city and people send you money. Like, there's a tiny, maybe in another lifetime, in another like iteration, I would have done that and would have had so much fun. But right now, no, I don't think it's part of my path.
So there's nothing like, have you noticed like anything new? Okay, so feminists talk a lot about like how porn has influenced sex, and I think that's one of their like primary concerns, which is like, oh, like things like choking are more common, things like anal sex are more common, and they would say this is because of, you know, pornography and the normalization and mainstream of pornography, and boys are watching porn younger and younger, so they're into doing more violent stuff. They're into doing all these things that girls don't like, or, you know, women don't like. So have you noticed like that kind of thing at all? Like that sort of like porn acts are more prominent or not really?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of people who feel that way, but it's weird because it's like I started being like, I guess, sexual, whatever, at like 14, which is way too young. But the guy I was with like pushed my head down. I was like, all right, I guess I'm doing a blowjob today. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but like, get ready, Steve. This is gonna be the worst blowjob of your life. Like, I'm 14. That's because his name is Steve. Steve, shout out to Steve Carroll if you're listening.
Okay, I thought you just made up Steve.
He's married with kids. He's doing great.
Okay.
He told me he was an Abercrombie model, and that's all. I was like, sold. I should have been like, show me what catalog you've been in. Let's fact check this. But anyway, so yeah, I feel like I was sexual earlier than I needed to, but I wish I could go back in time and be like, you can say no. Like, and I didn't think I had enough confidence at the time. Like, I was like, oh, boys like me. Like, this older guy likes me. Like, wow. Like, what a confidence boost. Like, I have to be cool and not ruin that. Like, but I wish I could go back and be like, no, you can say no. You're still cool. Like, this guy still likes you. But it's like, if you're not comfortable doing something, like, totally say no. Like, you'll have the rest of your life to do that. But it's weird because it's like I had never really like watched porn growing up, but I am somebody who's into like a little bit of choking because I like a dominant guy, like, and I like a little bit like, not a guy to like hold me down a little bit, like a little bit of like a sign of strength there, just because that's like personally hot for me. So even though I'm somebody who who never grew up like watching porn, like I kind of liked when a guy would like show a little strength or be a little aggressive. But some girls who aren't into that, you could totally be like, oh, this is because of porn. Whereas some girls like a guy to be more dominant, and being more dominant comes like a little bit of a move, like the range of that to like, yeah, you're being spanked and choked and all that and like tied up. So it's like, depending on like what you like, you know, you could definitely make a case for porn making guys like more aggressive, especially if they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. I thought girls like this. Like, I thought this is, you know, this is what I've seen. Whereas like you should have that talk with somebody, be like, do you like it a little bit rougher? And then like go from
Yeah, I mean,
there.
I feel like I just haven't noticed like that. I've read about that, and I've heard a lot of feminists say that, and there's research that shows that, but I actually haven't noticed that, you know, as porn, because, you know, I grew up in the 90s, so there was no internet porn. That, you know, internet porn came when I was an adult. And I haven't really noticed anything change about the way that men have sex. I feel like
Yeah.
some men are good in bed and some men are bad in bed. And I haven't noticed any particular uptick in violence and, like,
No, I haven't
you
either.
know, yeah. And what I like has changed basically as I got to know myself better and what I like, and felt sort of more comfortable about that, and in some ways honestly less like pressured by political expectations, and being like, I actually don't want to like put politics into my sex life. I just want to have my sex life and not feel like, oh, I shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't like this and I shouldn't like this because it's not like in line with feminism or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably a lot of like feminists that you know, yeah, they feel like they should like sex a certain way, but they don't. And they're like, oh, if this gets out, then I'm like, you know, I'm a bad feminist if I like to be choked. It's like, come on, like that's a lot of people like that. It's like a lot of women like
Yeah.
to be like thrown around. It doesn't
And
mean
I'm sorry, but men are bigger than women, and men are sort of like the dominant sex. I feel like I'm not supposed to say that, but it's true. And obviously, I'm attracted to men because they're men, and I am attracted to like alpha males. I'm attracted to guys who are more dominant. So yeah,
Mhm.
like I kind of like that kind of thing too. And
If anything,
I
it's
don't know
some
if it's with somebody that you care about and you trust. Like I don't know. I think it's kind of nice.
yeah, if anything, I think like the sex trends are like more guys are afraid to make the move or like be as dominant as they'd like because they're afraid of being like me too'd or they're afraid of like,
Mm.
you know, triggering
So maybe
someone
that's
or
a good thing. I don't know. Oh,
getting in
well, they shouldn't
trouble.
be afraid of fingering somebody.
But just
Oh,
in
well,
my
maybe
like
just out of the blue.
just in my like sample
Just
size
somebody.
of like guys I've hooked up with, I haven't noticed like their behaviors change all that much, you know, over
Yeah, I
over the
haven't
last
either.
like
It seems
20
pretty.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems pretty like consistent, and I think it really just depends on the person. I mean, I sort of do. I have heard, like, I have friends who whose partners have been like not that into sex or have like problems with like getting it up and things like that, which I think actually do have to do with porn and like using porn too much, and
Mm.
just because of what they've told me about their situations where like these guys obviously use a lot of porn and then they can't really get off in real life situations with
Ugh,
real
which is
women.
so tragic, right? Like you're just like, "Oh man." That's when it's bad. That's when it's like when you're giving your best load to like some girl you'll never meet, you know, and some but the girl that you are meeting and like in real life, it's like, ugh, you
You
can't.
can't satisfy her, like, and you can't actually follow, you can't satisfy yourself with her
Mhm.
either. Like, pretty depressing. Okay, so there was a bunch of other stuff I wanted to talk to you about too. I was like, when I emailed you, I was like, there's
Oh
some stuff
yeah,
we could talk about, but like
we
also
got
I
so
find with live
sidetracked.
streams they kind of go off into all sorts of areas. But I mean, one of the things that I did want to talk to you about was your like political trajectory, because I mean, I think, would you have called yourself a leftist in the past or like,
Totally. Yeah, I
yeah,
was a
okay.
card-carrying feminist, like women's studies minor. Yeah, the registered Democrat, voted for Obama. I think, God, did I vote for John Kerry? Did not vote for Hillary, voted for Jill Stein in 2016. So that's when I was like beginning to move away from the left. I was not sold on Trump, but I was like definitely not into Hillary. But I didn't like know enough. I probably should have, if I were to go back, I should have voted for like, I forgot the libertarian candidate's name at the time, but I probably should have done that. Where now I feel like I'm maybe more settled in a libertarian space. But yeah, like right out of college, very liberal. Was I don't know. Yeah, I was a little bit treading into like the SJW category too, because I was like part of the like social justice club in college, and like all my friends were that way. Like, and now now all those friends have blocked me, won't talk to me anymore. So,
And you identified as a feminist, right?
for sure, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And so what happened? Like, what changed?
Well, I needed an air conditioner put in, and I couldn't lift it myself. No.
Classic story.
Yeah, I was like, somebody.
I guess I'm not a feminist after all.
Come
I don't know
back.
how to fix this
I
car.
can't change the tire. Whoops, I didn't mean what I said. A little bit of that, a little bit of like just real life, living your life, realizing like, hey, men are great. We shouldn't hate them. We need each other. It's not like we shouldn't strive to not need men. I think that's what like feminism gets wrong. It's like, and a lot of this hatred comes from their own relationship, like with their father or like past boyfriends, and it's like, that's not a way to heal. Is to just cut off like 50% of the population. It's like heal yourself and then be willing to go back out there and risk heartbreak again,
Well, yeah, and I don't want to be mad all the time. And I don't want to like play into these cliches about like all feminists are angry. But I really was angry. Like when I was younger, I was really mad. I was mad all the time, and I was mad at men. And then, at a certain point, yeah, I don't want to be mad all the time. And I sort of was like, okay, I need to actually relate to men as human beings and not just through this lens of politics and the patriarchy, because this is, I have problems too. Like, I'm not perfect. They're not perfect. We were both raised in this culture. We were both raised in fucked up families, or, I'm just saying most people are raised in kind of fucked up families. Like, we're impacted by all sorts of things, like the way we're raised, the culture around us, the things that we see in the media, like pressures, ego, like fear of vulnerability, all this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, if I expect compassion and empathy and understanding in terms of my flaws, then I have to give that back also. And I want to see people as human beings. Like, I also sort of started to feel like, I'm like, well, in some ways, like women can be shitty. It's not like women are so great, It's not like all men are bad and all women are good. Like, give me a break.
Yeah, misandry is a real thing, like, especially now. I think it's just like it's gotten so much worse. Whereas like for me, like I was a sort of like maybe, I don't know, an intellectual feminist. Like I had studied feminist theory. I was like, I could talk about like intersectional feminism like from an intellectual standpoint. I wasn't like seeing so much of it like in my life, but it's like, all right, it's good to read women authors and learn about women's history, and like, okay. And it was more like, yeah, you're in college, you're here in college, like you should probably use your parents' money and get some sort of career, even though like tiny part of me was like, oh, I really hope I meet a guy at college and like get married. But like I wasn't picked. That didn't happen for me. So it's like I graduated college kind of like mad, like low-key mad that I hadn't been picked. It's like you spent 4 years with these people and like
nobody married
and
you.
Then you see Chris McGee run off with somebody else, and you're like, wow, it's fine. It's fine. He's married now. Kids. His wife.
I mean,
his eyes are too far apart. I feel like I dodged a bullet.
I mean, I feel like I do want to say, because I can anticipate the kind of pushback I'll get. It's like, I think that the feminist movement is one of the most important movements that's ever existed. I mean, it brought us like the vote, and like we can own property, and we can get an education, and like rape is a crime, and domestic abuse is a crime, and like, sexual harassment in the workplace is not acceptable. Like all these really, really important things happen because of the feminist movement. But I do feel like modern feminism in the West especially has turned into, kind of a lot of conversations about silly things and has lost sight of the fight for actual women's rights, which is what feminism should be about, rights and sort of helping women to live in the most autonomous way they can, to live free and to be able to be independent if they would like to be independent.
Yeah, I think the problem was never like feminism and the LGBT community. It's like they kind of kept going at their trajectory, right? I think the problem was like in the meantime, like the nuclear family kind of went to shit, and like core American values were going to shit. Patriotism was going to shit. Like we have all these supposedly Marxists and communists now infiltrating the school system. Like that's been going to shit. It's like, but feminism and LGBTs, like they've been going strong this whole time. So now they're ahead, and everything else has seemingly like gone to shit. That's why it's like, whoa, what happened? It's like these things we were ignoring like the pillars of sort of like American life for a while.
So did you stop identifying as a feminist at a certain point?
Yeah. When did probably around like 20. Wow, because I know when I met my current boyfriend, which was 2014, I would still have called myself a feminist. I think around 2018, I was really starting to like question things. Maybe 2016, thinking more like, started to talk to more libertarians, started to be like, oh, I guess I'm not a liberal. My whole identity was sort of like cracked open. But when you really laid it out, like what are the things that, of course, most people are like, yes, be gay, do whatever you want, get married, like just like most people I think are like socially liberal, and then like as I started to like work more, and then you're like, oh God, these taxes are pretty shitty, like the older you get, the more you're like, I want to keep some of the money I'm making. So I feel like it's normal to be kind of like centrists / like libertarian, So
we're like, I kind of like capitalism.
Yeah, I know. It's like you wouldn't be able
like,
to sell
I'm not
that.
sure I want communism.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to
Just
sell that
I used to be a communist, right? Like I was a Marxist.
Well, it's easy to be a communist and a Marxist when you make no money and you have like not much going for you. Then of course you're like,
when you're in university and
other
like,
people should pay for
like,
my
oh
existence.
shit, I'm gonna have a lot of debt. Yeah, I mean, I was
lived
always
your whole
broke.
existence. Somebody else paying for your life. Like you wouldn't be in college if somebody wasn't paying for you to live. So of course, communism and Marxism is going to appeal to you because you haven't like supported yourself at any point in your whole life. So
I mean, I'm saying, and I was like, like I always worked. When I was in university, I worked. I always had like 3 jobs. Like I had to do university part-time for a really long time because I was working full-time and I was like not trying to get into crazy student loan debt. And eventually I did have to go into debt and did get a crazy student loan debt because you really you can't finish a degree doing it part-time. It's not set up that way. And I did a master's degree and I started a second master's degree in journalism.
Wow.
Blah, 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 blah. I think I'm the only person in the existence of ever that has actually made a career out of having like degrees in women's studies because I started a feminist website and, did, feminist journalism and did a feminist podcast for a really long time. My career has been like rooted in this. But part of my hatred of capitalism was the fact that I was like broke and like other people had money and it didn't really seem fair. And I mean, it kind of wasn't fair in some ways. I was like, how come like my friends have like houses and can go on vacations and stuff like that?
My friends with rich parents, so mad. Even
it's like, oh, you bought a house. Hey, how'd you do that? Like, how come I can't? Like, I know why. It's because it's not your money. It's your parents' money. But anyway, I sort of like took you off on another tangent. But so you stopped it. I just want to actually address one. Somebody in the comments asked if I still identify as a feminist, and then somebody in the comments said no, she does not. And it's not true. It's that like of course I'm a feminist. Like my entire career has been like defending women's rights, and has been so much of it in the past few years has been defending women's sex-based rights. Like this is what I do with my life. But I don't like labels anymore, and I don't want to put myself in any category. I just want to explain what I mean.
Ruined. Yeah. Like I too like feel like I want to stand for women's rights. Like now it's like a woman should be able to like get married and have kids and like not work is no matter how many degrees she has. If that's what she wants to do, that's what she wants to do. Whereas like back in the day, I would think like, oh, you're just gonna reproduce. Like what a waste. Like what a common basic bitch you are. But now it's like, yeah, don't judge that. Like let somebody be a mom if they want to be a mom. It doesn't, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my interest. I've never wanted to have kids. That's just never been an interest of mine, and I'm glad that I don't have kids, and I like my life a lot. But yeah, I grew up thinking that being a mom or being a stay-at-home mom, being a homemaker was really pathetic. And I sort of thought just having kids was kind of pathetic. And like I was like, oh, you want to get married and have kids? Like, what's wrong with you? You're so lame. And that is, that does have a lot to do with feminism and yeah, this idea that you should want more and that's like a really lame goal and you're kind of oppressing yourself when you do that.
It's wild too, because I think if I had met a guy, especially in college, who had a really great, and there's so many girls I know that went this way. They met a guy with a fantastic job, like totally make a ton of money, right? And they could afford to not work and just have kids. Like I think I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a really attractive like idea for me at one point. But I never had that offered to me. Like I've never dated a guy that could take care of me financially. So there's literally like if I'm being honest, there is a part of me that's like, well, fuck that, it's like because that's never been an option for me. So like there is a part of me that's like jealous of the woman that is an option for, because there's something about that like life that's like looks a little bit glamorous to me. It's like you can just sit home and Instagram and
I think I'd be so bored.
You don't have to slave, because I just feel like I've spent so much years slaving in a commute, working like 1, 2, 3 jobs. Like, and I even even when I'm bored, sometimes I'll look at pictures of my friends' kids. I'm like, oh wow, it's like you don't have to like run around New York City at like 2 a.m. doing spots. Like you don't have to like always working for somebody else who doesn't respect you, who like always a boss who sucks, who hates you. Like wow, you can just be home and raise kids. Like there's part of me that thinks like, man, that looks pretty sweet. And like, but
I always think though, like it's like, because I know people who've been in that situation and they've just gotten really screwed when they got a divorce. So I always think, I'm like, man, you could end up in a real
because you leave yourself situation. So vulnerable, right?
Yeah, and then you're all of a sudden on your own and you don't have a career because you put everything into and it does suck. And it's not fair because you have been doing work, you've been raising a family, like you've been doing something really, really important, but then you're left very vulnerable when you're in that situation, unfortunately.
And I think I was always scared of being in that situation. Like wow, like you almost get so I don't like burned kind of, because you're just like, oh man, like I kind of grew up with this, like partially it was like looking at my parents, partially it was like pop culture, probably was just like the guys I was dating. It's like I got the message that like, yeah, like whoever you end up with is probably going to cheat on you. Like you get married, they're going to find somebody else that they want. They're probably going to leave you or at least lose interest and start fucking around behind your back. So I didn't even like, it made me not want to take the plunge of like monogamy or marriage. So like, you're just going to get hurt. So you might as well like not play the game. And I think that's the part of feminism that like used to really appeal to me.
And you've changed your mind about that.
I'm still scared of those things, but it's like, okay, I have the person I'm with now. It's like we can talk through that if I'm having like that fear in real time, or if I have, oh, I had a dream you cheated on me, and then like we talk about it. So I am more like trusting.
I mean, you never really know. I mean, the truth about relationships is you never really know, and you never have control. And that was sort of the one thing that made me think that marriage was kind of stupid for a long time, because I was like, well, what does marriage guarantee me that just being in a long-term committed relationship doesn't guarantee me? I was like, I can't force somebody not to leave me or not to cheat on me or, not to lose interest or fall out of, like, you really don't have as much control over your life as I think you do. I mean, which isn't to say like you shouldn't make good choices for your life and that you can't make good choices for your life. Of course you can, and of course you should. But yeah, I was sort of like, well, why get married? Like, what does that provide for me?
Yeah.
Like either they're going to commit or not commit.
Right. And there is part of me that's like, kind of, what's the point of marriage if unless the guy makes way more than you? Because if not, then like what is like the tax benefit there? Like what is the monetary benefit? There isn't really one. It's just like, okay, a piece of paper and hopefully someone's gonna be more loyal to you. But should you
Hopefully.
need
I mean,
that?
I
Yeah.
would like to have a party for myself. So that's sort of the main incentive for me.
Oh, for the wedding?
Yeah. I'd like to have a wedding. I don't super care that much about marriage, but I was so anti-marriage for almost all my life that I was like, I'm never getting married. No, I refuse. And I had fights with boyfriends about it. So I was like, no, I don't want to get married. This is a patriarchal institution. And since then I've been like, sure, I would get married. Like it's not my main goal in life, but if I was with a partner who we loved each other and he wanted to get married or we decided we wanted to get married, then I totally would. But I still don't think it, or if there was a good reason to, like a green card reason or something like that. And I do,
Scary.
yeah, I love weddings. So I would totally like to have a wedding. I like parties.
I
Like,
feel it's weird, like it's backward. Like I feel like I've been in a relationship that's basically feels like marriage at this point. Like but there like hasn't been a wedding. It's almost like I'd rather have like the relationship that feels like a marriage, but it's like, okay, maybe you can still get out if like shit gets bad. I don't know. And then like people are saying in the chat, like marriage used to be the assurance that someone wasn't going to leave you, and now it's almost like marriage doesn't mean anything to anybody. Because right, like so many married guys
you can just
cheat.
leave.
The wife never knows exactly what the chat is saying. I have so many like porn star friends who are also escorts, and all like so many of them are with like married guys. So it's like, learning the harsh realities of life, but you do have control over
Yeah.
yourself and your own reactions and like building yourself up.
So, okay, so you voted for Jill Stein in 2016, and then in 2020 you voted for Trump. To get back to this political trajectory thing that I asked you about, what happened there? Why did you decide to vote Trump?
Um, it was just kind of like my eyes were open to what they would call like, I guess the dark web of the internet, the intellectual dark web. Isn't that who they used to call like, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson? Yeah. I was like, oh, these guys are like kind of making a lot of points. And I think it was watching like the comedy industry kind of get very woke and very like there were so many attacks on free speech, and I would see like other comedians coming after me like for impressions I had done, and I was like, oh wow, there's so much like canceling going on like within comedy. That's what kind of activated me politically. I was like, oh wow, like if free speech is in danger here, then I can't do stand up, I can't do comedy, I can't do what I do. And like, because I never gave a fuck about politics. Like I would like, I forget, I think I voted for Obama the first time, and then the second time he ran, I just didn't want to miss yoga, so I didn't even vote that year. I just was like, I gotta make this Bikram class. So, but it wasn't until I saw like free speech in danger and how it applied to comedy that I was like, oh no, like I'm forced to give a shit. And then like starting to see like the censorship. And with Trump, like at first I thought he was like, obnoxious, but then like I don't know, it just clicked one day. I think he kept saying like fake news, and then all of a sudden it just like it pulled the wool back as far as like the mainstream media for me, and I was like, oh my god, it's all propaganda. Like Trump, not a perfect guy, but like he got a lot right. And I think I was kind of attracted to like the populist, kind of allure of him. He said a lot of things that people were thinking, and he wasn't like this like kind of like lifer, you know Washington guy. And I just was like, oh yeah, all right, I think I get it. I was like, wow, he's a patriot. Like he loves this country. We hadn't seen that. I hadn't seen that like really in my lifetime yet.
I mean, to me, I was living in Canada at the time. Now I've run away to Mexico because I think Canada is terrifying. Um, but we're really on the like anti-free speech train over there. Like I legit I was like, I'm not gonna be able to work. Like I'm gonna get arrested. Like something really bad is gonna happen. And I'm getting the fuck out of here. But like I started, when Hillary Clinton lost, in 2016, I cried. I was like devastated. I was so upset for her. Like I was like, this isn't fair. And how could she lose to this like horrible man who was such a bully and such a misogynist? And I just didn't get it. But I did want to understand. So I did start to try to understand. And once I did start to try to understand, I understood. And then, I began to really hate the Democrats, and was like, they are in bed with big tech. They're totally on board with censorship stuff where it's like, if you go against their MO, then they're gonna censor you or cancel you or whatever. I knew for sure that they would take away women's sex-based rights and let men compete in sports against women. And still there was all these, feminists and progressives who were like, but we can't vote for Trump. And it's like, I don't think Trump's a great guy. Like personally, like I think he's an asshole. And I think he's a liar, but I also think that the Democrats are manipulative liars. And what they were doing, I thought, was actually more dangerous than what Trump might do.
Yeah.
And of course, I got attacked for saying, I was like, if I was living in the US, I would probably vote for Trump because I think that voting for Biden would be worse. And I think it has been worse. I mean, he immediately did what he said he was going to do, which was to, say that, boys can compete against girls in sports, essentially like end women's sports, allow women or men to be transferred to women's prisons. And, we have people like whatever AOC wanting to put together lists of Trump supporters. And we have companies like Twitter and, PayPal banning people from being able to function in life and make a living because of their political views.
Yeah. It's crazy. I was like very similar to you, like kind of on Trump. Like, yeah, definitely not a perfect guy. I agree with like the chat when they say like both sides are kind of paid for. Like the two-party system is bullshit. And it's like they almost make it like kind of impossible for like a libertarian candidate to really like gain enough ground, which is like very sad. And I think the older I get, the more I don't know. I'm like sort of soured by the whole thing. I'm just like, you do feel hopeless at times. But it definitely,
and the media propaganda stuff. I mean, as you mentioned, right? It's like you start seeing the propaganda in the media, and you're like, well, I don't trust any of you. And I started to feel I was like so manipulated, and what happened on January 6th was a good example of that. And you were there, and you saw what happened, and you saw that it was not how the Democrats represented it, and it wasn't how it was represented in the media. Like, so what did happen?
It was so overblown, and I got into like, I talked about this on the Megyn Kelly podcast. I was like from my point of view, from what I saw that day, it was like very chill. It was, and of course, like that's what they take out and put in like Newsweek and all these articles like, oh, Chrissie Mayr said January 6th was like so chill. And of course, like they love to take you out of context to suit their needs. But I mean, if I hadn't seen any of the videos and the photos that are like splashed everywhere, right? Like, oh, it's insurrection. It's like it wasn't a freaking insurrection. Like nobody was armed. They let us just walk in. There was like no cops anywhere. It was just like felt like a day at the park from what I saw. It's just like families, walked up to the Capitol building. Some people got rowdy and like climbed up the side of the thing, and some people were like dropping a flag over the scaffolding. But I didn't see anything crazy from where I was at. I was just like, wow, look at all these patriots. Like, wow, look at all these people with their flags. Like, look, everybody, they love their country. And they're just like, they're very concerned about multiple things going on right now. And they want their voices to be heard. It's like, wow, like so many people that I talked to, their parents or they themselves were from like Venezuela or Cuba. And they're like, whoa, this country's starting to slip into a really scary place, like these countries that we were trying to get away from. So it was depicted like really unfairly. Like, yeah, of course there was like a bad batch of people who like busted in and like, Ashley Babbitt was murdered. That was horrible. It never should have happened. Like she was unarmed, and it's crazy making because we just came off of a whole summer of anybody doing whatever the F they wanted in the name of Black Lives Matter and immediately being released from jail. They'd have like celebrities like bailing them out, you know? Um, just it's made the people of this country like feel like they're nuts. They're like, oh wow, certain people get some rules and other people you know, get in trouble. And we see that with our politicians. Like, oh, certain politicians can have huge parties at their house and have hundreds of people over. Nobody's masked. Oh, but everybody else, we have to get on board with the vax passport or else. So
Right.
it's enough to make you like pretty angry.
Yeah, I mean there's like this obvious like class system and then it's obviously political. It's true. It's like I mean, how can you have been okay with what went down all summer long, which was really, really violent and really, really destructive, and pretend like that's fine and then freak out over what happened on January 6th and act like this is
Oh yeah.
extremism and domestic
And then like
terrorism and all this
yeah, the
stuff.
couple guys had strokes. Couple guys were like just, you know, like died of a stroke or something or a heart attack from their own pre-existing conditions, all right? And then you're gonna blame it on the people that came to the Capitol, like, oh, these people killed or died. It's like, no, like if somebody has a heart attack, like you can't really blame that on people who come to the Capitol to protest. And it's enough to make you nuts because we saw like in 2018, tons of people were let into the Capitol building or went into the Capitol building because they were trying to protest against like I think Kavanaugh being confirmed. So it's like full of women in pussy hats, but that's fine. And Pelosi says that's participating in democracy. But people from the right or from the center show up to the Capitol building and oh, you're an insurrectionist. So
Well, and
it's
people
really
will
unfair.
admit that it's political too. You know, people when so I posted an article recently from Barry Weiss's Substack about this thing where people were getting banned from platforms like PayPal, for example, for political reasons. And somebody responded and was like, well, you know, it's okay because these people support like extremist violence or they're white supremacists. And it's like, well, they're not, these people aren't white supremacists, but I mean, these terms have been stretched to such a point that they can be applied to whoever you want them to. But you know, I was like, but don't you see that it could be you next? Like, why do you think that you're protected? But you know, people really do think like, oh, well, if I don't like these people's politics or these beliefs, then these people are bad and dangerous, and it's fully acceptable to kick them out of society or ensure that they can't survive and make a living. And I find that really, really scary.
Yeah, and I've had like a lot of friends who've been like visited by the FBI. And then I have like people who are constantly like tagging the FBI with like tweets I write. And it's like, I'm still waiting for them to show up. Like, if they want to come to a comedy show, I'd love to give them comps, you know. Well, welcome anybody. But yeah, I guess was smart not to go in and do anything crazy that day. But yeah, the
Um,
treatment is really unfair.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to let you go soon. I know I've kept you for a while, but I did want to. I know that you recently you took a stand against the vaccine passports, the vaccine mandates, and said that you wouldn't do any comedy shows at NYC venues that demanded a vaccine for entry. Is that right?
Yeah, because I just it's wild to call it anything other segregation by vaccination status. It's you know a night out is not worth giving up your freedom and your privacy, and it's crazy how many people are just like laying down and taking it, and it's crazy to see like how this was how this has been so escalated like so quickly. um I didn't expect it to happen in New York, but it's like I wouldn't it'd be one thing if I, you know, it's like a private citizen and I'm like, all right, there's ways to like get around it that people are probably aware of, but it's like, okay, it's like I have this platform, I'm this whatever public-ish figure. It's like I'd rather go down fighting for what's right than just sort of like sneak around it like for my own benefit. It's like, yeah, there's plenty of places that I would perform in New York, but it's like I want to give people I want to let people know that it's okay to opt out of this, that you don't just like have to take it, you know? And there's so many people that can't get it for medical reasons, like what's his face, the drummer of The Offspring, Pete Paranda, I think his name is. He did this like long thread all about how like he talked with his doctor and his doctor said it's not right for him. Um but like anybody who just is asking questions of this one particular vaccine is deemed a crazy anti-vaxxer, and you can't ask questions about it. And it's really wild, and it's really unconstitutional.
Well, yeah, and in large part because a lot of the people who are sort of not super stoked on getting this vaccine aren't anti-vax in any way at all, and have gotten tons of vaccines and are just not compelled by this particular vaccine either, because they just don't think it's necessary, or that they think it doesn't work, or they're worried about long-term impacts that they don't know about, or whatever it is. But it's funny because I was listening to a podcast the other day. Was it Rogan? I really wish I could remember what it was. It might have been Rogan.
Did speak out about it recently.
Yeah, I saw that on your Twitter feed, but it was saying, whoever was being interviewed was saying that, in fact, like, the mandates make people not want to get vaccines. And in places where they've never had any vaccine mandates ever, like Sweden, they have super high vaccination rates. And this is actually backfiring, like these mandates and these passports, and people feeling like their choices and their rights aren't respected, and they're being bullied and forced into doing this, both by their neighbors, by citizens, as well as by the government and media and stuff like that. Like, that actually is playing a large part. And I get that, because if I feel like I'm being bullied or pressured into doing something against my will, or that I'm not ready to do yet, or don't feel it, then I'm going to be like, no, like, and it'll make me trust you less. It's like, why are you trying to manipulate and bully me into doing this? Like, shouldn't the information and the science speak for itself? Like, I'm an intelligent person, and I know how to do research, and I do a lot of research, and I pay attention to what's going on, and I'm really going to look into something and try to understand it before I make a decision about it. I'm not going to make a decision about something because I'm being bullied or manipulated.
Absolutely. And they're all like, oh, trust the science. But then when scientists come out with concerns, it's like, oh, well, don't trust that science. Trust our science. Trust the scientists that we're clearly paying off, and oh, don't listen to like all these other doctors who have concerns. So it's there are just so many reasons to be distrustful of it, right? The propaganda. What? You don't want a free donut? You don't want a free train ticket? It's and then all these breakthrough cases. It's like, I think it was Dr. McCullough or somebody who tweeted like, "Oh, I'm young. I'm old enough to remember when breakthrough cases meant that a vaccine didn't work." And I'm like, "Oh, that's a pretty sweet way to. That's a good take." Yeah. Lots of question.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I just feel like there's so many things that have freaked me out over the course of all this COVID stuff. And, it has led so many people, including myself, and as it should, to mistrust what the government and the authorities and the officials and the media are telling you, because, they've changed their mind 800 times based on politics, not based on science. And it's like, oh, now we're supposed to trust the science? Like, I don't trust anything you say. Like, good job.
Mm-hmm. Good job. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll let you go. I know it's late for you. Thanks so much for joining me. It was really great to connect with you again. Do you want to let people know if you have any shows coming up?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be actually in Jersey this Thursday, in Beach Haven, New Jersey. It's called Bird and Betty's on the Jersey Shore. And then I'm going to New Orleans this weekend, Friday and Saturday. I'm doing 4 shows at the Comedy House in New Orleans. And then I'll be in Vegas September 10th and 11th. For comedians of the compound, we'll be at the Plaza Hotel at the Comedy Works Club down there. And then I'll be in Dallas September 17th and 18th. I'm headlining Hyenas down there in Dallas. And then I'm coming to California October 22nd and 23rd. That'll be interesting. I'll be headlining the Broadway Comedy Club West in Santa Monica. So excited to see what's left of California. And then check out the Chrissie Mayr podcast on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud. Follow me at Chrissie Mayr on Twitter, and then Chrissie Mayr Pod on Instagram.
Okay, and all those links are in the show notes, everybody, too. So yeah, follow her and support her. Thanks. I hope we get to talk again soon.
Yeah, this was great. It was good to talk to you.
Yeah, and hopefully I'll get to see you in real life sometime. I think I'm going to be traveling to the States a bit this fall, so hopefully we'll be able to connect in person someday. That would be fun.
I'll get my hoops and come to Mexico.
Or everyone should come to Mexico. It's the best here. Okay, have a great night. Thanks everybody for
Megan.
coming. Okay,
Thanks, Kat.
bye.